The red ink pen hovered over a massive stack of junior year American history essays. The house was completely silent, except for the low, rhythmic hum of the kitchen refrigerator. Then my phone vibrated aggressively against the solid oak dining table. The caller identification displayed my mother's name. I answered on the second ring, fully expecting a mundane question about packing lists or airport arrival times for our upcoming family vacation. Instead, her tone was completely casual, entirely stripped of any hesitation, warmth, or basic parental guilt. She calmly told me that Tyler's wealthy parents had suddenly decided to come to Maui instead of staying in their summer home. Because of this unexpected change in the guest list, they desperately needed my master suite to make a good impression on their future in-laws. She was talking about the master suite inside the $35,500 luxury Hawaiian estate. The estate that I had meticulously researched and booked, the estate that I had paid for entirely out of my own hard-earned savings. I set the red pen down on the table. The silence stretched across the cellular line, feeling thick, heavy, and suffocating. My mother sighed loudly, clearly annoyed by my lack of an immediate, accommodating response. She casually added that my single relationship status would severely ruin the aesthetic of Madison's professional engagement photos anyway. So my absence was actually a profound blessing for the family's public image. Then came her final, infuriating instruction, delivered exactly like a royal command to an unpaid servant. I needed to stay in Charlotte, cancel my approved time off from work, and dog sit Madison's destructive labradoodle for the entire week. The line hummed with electrical static. She waited patiently for me to cave. She fully expected me to just roll over, swallow my pride, and blindly accept my abrupt eviction from my own desperately needed vacation. I am 34 years old, and for the last 10 agonizing years, I have been a high school history teacher. You learn a tremendous amount about strict discipline and behavioral manipulation when you manage classrooms full of rebellious teenagers. But my hardest, most stubborn students were always the members of my own blood family. I swallowed the thick, burning lump forming in my throat and stared directly at the polished hardwood floor. My chest tightened until it physically ached. But I forced my breathing to slow down into a steady, metered rhythm. I did not raise my voice in anger. I did not demand a logical explanation or list my endless financial sacrifices. I simply picked up the phone, brought the receiver to my ear, and delivered my final answer. I told her to have a great trip. My voice was completely steady, flat, and entirely hollow. I pressed the red button to end the call. The glowing screen went black, reflecting my own exhausted, deeply drained face. Then I stood up, walked into my home office, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the private concierge portal for the Maui luxury estate. I typed in my master security password and accessed the primary booking page. I specifically chose to leave their 10-hour outbound airline flights completely untouched. I wanted them to happily pack their designer bags. I wanted them to excitedly ride to the airport. I wanted them to fly thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean. I wanted them to land in a tropical paradise. Totally oblivious to the absolute nightmare waiting for them, instead of touching the flights, I clicked directly on the estate guest manifest. I deleted Madison. I deleted my mother. I deleted my father. I deleted Tyler and his wealthy parents. I formally flagged all of their names as unauthorized trespassing guests with the estate's private security team. explicitly revoking their digital gate access codes. Next, I moved to the rental car reservations. 3 luxury sport utility vehicles, prepaid for the entire week, canceled. Then I pulled up their return flights home to North Carolina. I absorbed a steep cancellation penalty, watching the $3,000 fee automatically deduct from my overall refund balance. I smiled genuinely at the glowing screen. That fee was the absolute price of my permanent freedom, and it was worth every single penny. I picked up my phone again and texted my 3 best friends, telling them to immediately pack their bags because we were going to Hawaii. My final task for the evening was dealing with the dog. Madison's unruly Labradoodle was currently chewing on my expensive living room rug. I leashed him up, drove across town to the most expensive luxury pet boarding kennel in the city, and dropped him off. I handed the front desk receptionist Madison's credit card number, the exact card she had demanded I save on file for her supposed pet emergencies. Back in the quiet isolation of my house, I pulled my designer resort wear from the bedroom closet. My hands moved mechanically, folding floral dresses and bright swimsuits into my suitcase. But my mind was violently trapped in the past. I walked over to my wooden desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder. The receipts, 10 agonizing years of them, every bank transfer, every covered rent check, every bailed out emergency, all neatly categorized and chronologically filed. I stared at a faded, crumpled receipt from 6 years ago. Madison had recklessly wrecked her compact car while texting on the highway. And my mother had called me at midnight, crying hysterically, begging for a $5,000 emergency loan to cover the damages before my father found out and cut her off. I wired the funds that exact same night. I flipped to another glossy bank statement. $4,000 for Madison's rent when she abruptly decided she needed a gap year to find her true purpose and quit her corporate job without a single dollar in savings. I used to think I was genuinely being a deeply supportive sister. I used to think my endless financial sacrifices would eventually purchase their respect, or at least a shred of their basic human decency. The paper felt rough and dry between my fingertips. The devastating truth finally crystallized in my mind. I was never a sister or a daughter to them. I was a functioning financial appliance. You do not thank your kitchen refrigerator for keeping your produce cold. You just kick it aggressively when the motor stops working. The resentment burned like battery acid in the back of my throat. I gathered every single statement, every printed text message where Madison falsely promised to pay me back eventually, and every bank transfer confirmation number. I placed the massive stack of papers inside my heavy steel fireproof safe and locked the thick metal door. The family bank was permanently closed. My friends arrived an hour later, laughing loudly and dragging oversized suitcases up my driveway. I locked my front door, double-checked the heavy deadbolt, and walked toward their waiting car, leaving the suffocating ghost of my endless family obligations trapped inside the empty house. The warm Maui air smelled heavily of sea salt and blooming plumeria flowers when we finally stepped out of the busy airport terminal. We arrived at the $35,000 estate, and the sheer architectural scale of it was absolutely breathtaking. A massive infinity pool overlooking the dark blue ocean, a pristine modern kitchen, and endless radiant sunshine pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. We immediately popped a bottle of expensive champagne on the upper terrace, the delicate glass clinking against the rhythmic sound of crashing waves. 12 hours later, just as the sun began to slowly set, my phone screen rapidly lit up. The text messages arrived in a frantic, desperate sequence. My family had finally landed in Kahului. The first message was from my mother. She demanded to know where the rental cars were, stating the agency claimed our reservation did not exist. 10 minutes later, another rapid, furious text. The gate security would not let them inside the neighborhood. They were told they were unauthorized trespassers. She demanded I call her right now. I took a slow sip of my chilled drink and set the phone face down on the glass table. By hour 3 of their ordeal, the carefully constructed high society facade of Tyler's family completely shattered into dust. My mother left a frantic, breathless voicemail, her voice trembling with absolute, unadulterated panic. The estate security guards had physically threatened to call the local police if they did not immediately leave the perimeter. Tyler's wealthy parents, furious and deeply humiliated, had marched their heavy luggage to the nearest 5-star resort to book emergency luxury suite. But it was the middle of peak tourist season in Hawaii. The front desk receptionist demanded a mandatory $15,000 incidental hold per room just to authorize the check-in process. Tyler's father arrogantly handed over his heavy black premium credit card. Declined. He scoffed loudly, blamed the banking institution, and handed over a second premium card. Declined again. The devastating truth was entirely exposed in the middle of a crowded, luxurious hotel lobby. Tyler's family was heavily leveraged, living entirely on massive debt and fake country club prestige. They had absolutely zero liquid cash to their names. Madison sent a furious, completely unhinged text message that fiercely lit up my screen. She screamed through the text that Tyler's parents were entirely broke and that they were currently sitting in a sweltering rental van in a Walmart parking lot. She commanded me to fix the situation immediately. I read the message twice. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. Relaxing muscles that had been completely tense for a decade. I tossed my phone onto the cushioned lounge chair, stood up, and dove directly into the cool, crystal clear water of the infinity pool. I left every single one of them on red. 3 blissful. Sun-soaked days later, my phone completely stopped buzzing. Without my money to magically bail them out, the family had to desperately scramble back to North Carolina in utter, devastating disgrace. When I finally returned to Charlotte, tanned, rested, and glowing with new life, the intense reckoning was waiting directly on my front porch. My mother was standing there shivering in the evening air, her shoulders slumped, sobbing dramatically into a crumpled tissue. She looked incredibly small and pathetic. She begged me to let her inside the house to explain the entire misunderstanding. She wailed that Tyler's parents were viciously forcing him to call off the wedding entirely because of the massive public humiliation they suffered on the island. She pleaded with me to open my checkbook and pay for a new, extremely expensive local wedding venue to magically smooth things over and save the crumbling engagement. I looked at her, completely unfazed by her manufactured, weaponized tears. I reached into my leather purse, pulled out the final itemized invoice from the luxury dog kennel, and pressed it firmly into her trembling hand. Then, I stepped inside and shut the heavy oak door directly in her face. But Madison was absolutely not done. The false defeat is always the most dangerous, volatile part of dealing with a desperate narcissist. Tyler's parents were legally threatening to brutally sue Madison in small claims court for the massive out-of-pocket travel costs of their ruined trip. desperate to extort emergency money from me. Madison went completely scorched earth. She called the principal of my high school directly. She left a hysterical voicemail claiming I had maliciously stolen thousands of dollars from a vulnerable family trust, that I was severely mentally unstable, and that I was a direct, terrifying danger to my students. Her goal was sickeningly calculated and intensely cruel. She wanted me immediately suspended or fired, aggressively forcing me to cash out my teacher's retirement pension to settle her debts just to make the relentless harassment stop. The principal called me into his office the very next morning before the first bell even rang. He looked deeply concerned, his hands folded tightly over his desk. He played the voicemail aloud for me to hear. I did not panic. I did not cry. Madison had just foolishly crossed the legal line from petty family drama into defamation per se. I smiled warmly, thanked the principal for his complete transparency and professionalism, and drove straight home. I opened my fireproof safe, grabbed the 10 years of meticulously organized receipts, and drove downtown to the sharpest civil litigation attorney I could find in the city. There was no drawn-out, magical courtroom drama, and there were no dramatic gavels banging. I sat in a sleek, heavily air-conditioned glass conference room while my ruthless lawyer drafted a brutal, evidence-backed demand letter, attaching a polished draft complaint ready to file immediately in civil court. The lawyer sent it via certified overnight mail to Madison. Tyler and Tyler's parents. The legal letter clearly and coldly stated that if this lawsuit went to a jury trial, the extensive financial records of Tyler's family would become public domain during the mandatory discovery phase. The sheer threat of their fake wealth being permanently and publicly exposed in highly accessible court records was the ultimate devastating weapon. The collapse of their alliance was instantaneous. Terrified of public financial ruin, Tyler's parents fled the state on a budget airline standby list, completely refusing to answer any phone calls. Tyler formally broke the engagement via a cowardly, generic text message to save face with his wealthy country club friends. He abandoned Madison completely, leaving her standing alone in the massive wreckage of her own entitlement. Madison was left with absolutely nothing. Facing a guaranteed six-figure lawsuit for defamation and a decade of unpaid loans, she had absolutely no choice. She sat directly across from me in my lawyer's polished office, her face sickly, pale, staring blankly at the massive stack of printouts scattered across the table. These were her own parking lot text messages where she explicitly admitted owing me $40,000. Written out in undeniable black and white, she picked up a heavy silver pen with violently shaking hands. She signed a legally binding, extremely strict repayment plan for every single dollar she had manipulated out of me over the last decade. Her wages would be heavily garnished until the massive debt was fully satisfied. Then she signed a humiliating formal retraction letter, legally admitting her malicious lies, which was immediately mailed directly to my school principal to clear my professional name permanently. She looked up at me, waiting for me to say something, desperately waiting for a single drop of sisterly sympathy. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and walked out the heavy glass door without ever looking back. I was entirely, wonderfully free. I sit on my wooden porch now, holding a warm cup of coffee, listening to the absolute beautiful silence of a life entirely without toxic family members. The evening air is perfectly still, My mind is finally permanently quiet. If you are watching this and you are the one desperately holding a broken, ungrateful family together with your own paycheck and your own sanity, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I spent 10 agonizing years believing that if I just gave enough money, enough time, and enough of my absolute soul, they would finally look at me and genuinely love me. But I had to learn 3 hard, unbreakable rules to survive and finally escape. Rule number 1 is the appliance theory. You do not thank a refrigerator for working. You just get irrationally mad when it stops keeping your things cold. Narcissists do not love you as a human being. They deeply love your utility. They love exactly what you provide to make their lives infinitely easier. The second they can leverage your resources to impress someone else, they will aggressively discard you without a single second of hesitation. You are merely a tool to them. And the only way to win the game is to unplug yourself entirely. Rule number 2 is the profound power of the silent guillotine. Never, ever argue with irrational, entitled people. Explaining your emotional boundaries just gives them a detailed roadmap of your deepest vulnerabilities. If you clearly tell them what hurts you, they will simply use it as heavy ammunition later. They will twist your words against you to play the innocent victim. Silence, however, is completely bulletproof. Act. Do not announce. Let the severe consequences of their own actions hit them like a runaway freight train while you absolutely refuse to engage. You do not owe an explanation to people who are entirely committed to misunderstanding you. Rule number 3 is the brutal truth about blood versus loyalty. DNA is merely a biological accident. Sharing a last name does not give anyone a permanent, unrestricted license to mentally abuse you, drastically drain your bank accounts, or publicly humiliate you. Loyalty, respect, and mutual reciprocity are daily. Conscious choices. You are absolutely allowed to legally and emotionally evict anyone from your life who only contacts you to make a withdrawal. Family is supposed to be a secure, safe harbor, not a sinking ship that demands you intentionally drown with them simply to prove your loyalty. If you are the responsible one, the family automated teller machine, the person who fixes every massive disaster, I want to ask you a very serious question. What happens if you just let go? You might just find out that the heavy, suffocating burden you were carrying for everyone else was the only thing keeping you from actually flying. You do not have to consistently set yourself on fire simply to keep toxic people warm. Drop a comment below if you have ever had to legally or emotionally shut the door on your own blood to save your own life. Subscribe to this channel if you are finally ready to permanently stop funding your own disrespect. Your mental peace is incredibly expensive, but it is worth whatever it costs to get it back. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, why on earth did she wait an entire decade to completely cut them off? Why did she keep paying for the wrecked cars, the apartment rent, and the luxury vacations when they treated her so terribly? It is incredibly easy to pass judgment from the outside looking in, but we desperately need to break down the deep psychology of what actually happened here. Megan was not stupid, and she was certainly not simply weak. She was intensely experiencing something clinical psychologists formally call intermittent reinforcement, which is commonly known as the slot machine effect. When you are raised in a highly toxic family dynamic, specifically designated as the family fixer or the invisible child, your parents do not just ignore you 100% of the time. Every once in a while, they strategically give you a tiny fleeting crumb of basic approval, a forced smile, a incredibly rare thank you, or a brief, intoxicating moment where you feel like you finally belong to the group. Your brain becomes entirely addicted to desperately chasing that rare emotional payout. Megan kept furiously swiping her credit card because she was not merely buying luxury vacations or paying monthly rent. She was desperately trying to purchase a family. But let us thoroughly talk about the brilliant, street-smart financial defense she utilized to finally break free from the cycle. Megan executed 3 brilliant moves that you absolutely need to memorize. First, the audit strategy. Notice how she did not just dramatically throw away the banking receipts when she was deeply hurt. Scammers, even the ones residing in your own family, heavily rely on your total emotional exhaustion. They want you far too tired to check the actual math. By carefully saving a decade of bank transfers, she built an impenetrable fortress of undeniable financial data. Second, the strategic withdrawal. When she was cruelly uninvited from the trip, she did not scream or demand a full refund from her mother. She went directly to the administrative source. She called the private concierge and legally revoked their physical access. If you are ever financially entangled with heavy manipulators, never attempt to negotiate with them. Cut the financial cord directly at the institutional level. Cancel the credit card. Legally remove the authorized user. Or permanently lock the bank account. Finally, the intentional buyout. Megan bravely absorbed a $3,000 cancellation fee for those airline flights. A lot of angry people would have stubbornly fought that fee on pure principle. But Megan recognized that the financial fee was the absolute cost of her permanent emotional freedom. Sometimes in complicated life and in highly toxic relationships, you have to willingly pay a steep exit tax to securely lock down your peace. Blood does not automatically make you a family. And shared history does not legally or morally obligate you to a lifetime of financial abuse. You are absolutely allowed to permanently walk away from people who intentionally hurt you, even if you share a last name. Trust and access must be continually earned, never blindly owed. If this psychological breakdown helped you see your own situation more clearly, aggressively share your story in the comments below. And hit subscribe for more street-smart strategies to actively protect your peace and your wallet. Stay incredibly sharp. And always remember, your intrinsic self-worth is absolutely not for sale. I know exactly what you were screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, why on earth did Megan wait an entire decade to completely cut them off? Why did she keep paying for wrecked cars, apartment rent, and $35,000 luxury vacations when they treated her like an unpaid servant? It is incredibly easy to pass judgment from the outside looking in, but we desperately need to break down the deep psychology of what actually happened here. Megan was not stupid. And she was certainly not weak. She was intensely experiencing something clinical psychologists formally call intermittent reinforcement. I like to call it the slot machine effect. When you are raised in a highly toxic family dynamic and designated as the family fixer, your relatives do not ignore you 100% of the time. Every once in a while, they strategically feed you a tiny fleeting crumb of hope, a forced smile, an incredibly rare thank you, or a brief moment where you feel like you finally belong to the group. Your brain becomes entirely addicted to pulling that lever, desperately chasing that rare emotional payout. Megan kept furiously swiping her credit card because she was not merely buying luxury vacations, she was desperately trying to purchase a family. But let us talk about the brilliant, street-smart financial defense she utilized to finally break free from this cycle. Megan executed 3 master moves that you absolutely need to memorize. First, building the case. Scammers, especially the ones sitting at your own Thanksgiving table, heavily rely on your total emotional exhaustion. They want you far too tired to check the actual math. By meticulously saving 10 years of bank transfers and parking lot text messages, Megan built an impenetrable fortress of undeniable financial data. Second, the audit strategy. When she was cruelly uninvited from the trip, she did not scream or demand a full refund from her mother. She went directly to the administrative source. She called the private concierge and legally revoked their physical access codes. If you are ever financially entangled with heavy manipulators, never attempt to negotiate with them. Cut the financial cord directly at the institutional level. Finally, the buyout. Megan bravely absorbed a $3,000 cancellation fee to avoid those return airline flights. A lot of angry people would have stubbornly fought that fee on pure principle. But Megan recognized that the financial fee was the absolute cost of her permanent emotional freedom. Sometimes you have to willingly invest in a steep exit tax to securely lock down your peace. Blood does not automatically make you a family. And a shared history does not legally obligate you to a lifetime of financial abuse. You are absolutely allowed to permanently walk away from people who intentionally hurt you, even if you share a last name. Trust and access must be continually earned, never blindly owed. If this psychological breakdown helped you see your own situation more clearly, share your survival story in the comments below. And hit subscribe for more street smart strategies to actively protect your peace and your wallet. Stay sharp, and always remember your intrinsic self-worth is absolutely not for sale.